Stream us when you need us. CBS 2 News is always streaming on CBS News Chicago.
Committed to telling your stories. CBS 2.
Test 1 2 3 4 5. Check 1 2. 1 2 3 4 5. Testing 1 2 3 4 5. How's everybody looking? Yeah. No, it is very tinny. Yeah, but that's just one channel.
The latest breaking news, first alert weather, and more streaming on CBS News Chicago.
Keeping you safer sooner. CBS 2 First Alert Weather. CBS 2 News streams here. CBS News Chicago.
Cutting the cord on cable? Stream CBS 2 News live every day on CBS News Chicago. Stream us when you need us. CBS 2 News is always streaming on CBS News Chicago.
Committed to telling your stories. CBS 2.
The latest breaking news, first alert weather, and more streaming on CBS News Chicago.
Keeping you safer, sooner. CBS 2 First Alert Weather. CBS 2 News streams here. CBS News Chicago.
Cutting the cord on cable? Stream CBS 2 News live every day on CBS News Chicago. Stream us when you need us. CBS 2 News is always streaming on CBS News Chicago.
Committed to telling your stories. CBS 2.
The latest breaking news, first alert weather, and more streaming on CBS News Chicago.
Keeping you safer, sooner. CBS 2 First Alert Weather. CBS 2 News streams here. CBS News Chicago.
Cutting the cord on cable? Stream CBS 2 News live every day on CBS News Chicago.
you all are ready to proceed, we will begin. Good afternoon. I'm Attorney Ben Crump, along with Attorney Steve Levin of Levin and Parental, and Attorney Margaret Battersby Black, and Attorney Richard Banks, and Attorney Natalie Jackson. We have the honor of representing a young man who has exemplified great courage, and that is Lloyd Yates. Also present with Lloyd are his parents, Dr. Yates and Dr. Yates. Anybody else? Yeah, we good. You know, I thought about this a lot, Margaret. Although there are other lawsuits that have been filed, this is the first lawsuit with a named plaintiff. And that courageous plaintiff is Lloyd Yates, who you will hear from momentarily. We have also included in our lawsuit quotes from players about their similar experiences. Players named Warren Miles Long and Simba Short. It's a real big deal when these young people have the courage to take a stand and refuse to be victims anymore, refuse to have their voices silenced, but to take a stand. And that's what Lloyd Yates and our legal team are doing today. With the filing of the Lloyd Yates complaint against Northwestern University, this will be acknowledged as college sports Me Too movement, in which we hope we will provide awareness around the issue and support to victims and the eradication of physical, psychological, and sexual hazing in college sports. Lloyd Yates' 52-page lawsuit provides graphic details about various kinds of hazing, physically, mentally, sexually, including allegations of 2 coaches who were allegedly ran. Our lawsuit today is the first in a series of lawsuits. We plan on filing over 30 individual lawsuits within the next coming weeks and months. You're going to hear from an incredible lawyer in just a minute, Attorney Battersby Black, who was one of the chief architects of this lawsuit, and she's going to get into the technical aspects of the complaint. And I cannot thank her and Attorney Natalie Jackson enough for, sleepless nights as we try to expose this issue, this systemic cultural, institutional issue that is bigger than any one individual. The Lloyd Yates lawsuit alleges against Northwestern University for reckless disregard of its own anti-hazing policies. Don't take Ben Crump's word for it. Don't take Lloyd Yates' word for it. Go look back, do the Google searches, see what the football coach said about hazing. 0 tolerance is what he said. So they violated their own anti-hazing policies. And the complaint brings allegations of negligence, gross negligence, which we believe was willful and wanton, violation of the Illinois Gender Violence Act, and even though we're here on the football program today, as we said previously, there are several other athletic programs who former student athletes at Northwestern University is talking about us today. And what's so significant about this Lloyd Yates lawsuit that we continue to acknowledge as college sports Me Too movement is because it will encourage some of those other people who are deliberating whether to go public or not. I know Margaret and Natalie have several that are going to come public, but there are so many people who are on the fence because they fear retaliation and they are intimidated by things people are saying on social media and these things. But I will say this, if you're listening and you were a victim of hazing at Northwest University or any other college across America, you are not alone. We stand with you. We hear you. Join this Me Too moment for college sports, and let's make a difference. With that, we're going to have next attorney Margaret Battersby Black.
Good afternoon. The 52-page complaint that we filed today details the extreme ritualized sexual hazing that was ingrained for decades in the Northwestern program. Northwestern has already admitted by their own report that there were significant opportunities to discover the conduct in the report. Our complaint outlines some of those significant opportunities. Years of repetitive, ritualized sexual hazing. Imagine at a training camp in a locker room of 50 to 100 men chanting, clapping, and shouting instructions at fellow players to engage in naked activities. Trainers and coaches are in the facility nearby and could hear what was going on because you could hear it outside of the building. In other instances, players were encouraged to trade insults in front of the entire team in an activity called trading block, where insults would frequently involve personal details ranging from intimate relationships to physical and mental and medical conditions of both the players and the staff, and the coaching and training staff were present at these dinners. Coaches actually organized other activities, such as the freshman belly flop challenge, where it was well known that if you didn't participate in this activity, you would get ran. There was the Gatorade Shake Challenge, where players were forced to drink thick Gatorade protein shakes, and team nutritionists who observed that players were asking for an unusual number of shakes beyond what would be needed for nutritional purposes, and would question whether they needed this many shakes but wouldn't put a stop to it or report it. Each one of the coaches and trainers in the program had a responsibility to report and inquire about these practices. To include everyone in this case who should have known would span decades and various roles at the university. We bring this lawsuit against Northwestern University because it's an institutionalized problem. The university had an anti-hazing policy, and Coach Fitzgerald has given recorded public service announcements regarding his zero tolerance policy. But in reality, there was no system to enforce the policy or monitor these activities, and the university failed these student athletes in not protecting them. And I think next we will hear from...
Let's go to Steve.
Steve?
Before we have Lloyd Yates, we're going to hear from the other members of our legal team. But we will acknowledge, and these are so graphic that we don't even know if we can go into detail, but we will say the hazing allegations in the complaint are the car wash, about upperclassmen standing naked in showers and people doing all kind of just crazy things. Naked drills, like hiking the balls and center quarterback exchange, naked rope swings, naked pull-ups in front of groups of individuals, as Attorney Battersby Black just said, the belly flop contest, the dredge, the trading block, the bus 2 stories, and the Gatorade challenge. In our lawsuit, we talk about those things in detail, but they're so very graphic when you talk about genitalia being exposed and what they're doing with them, that we implore you to read the lawsuit. To give a little more color to this lawsuit is a great lawyer here in Chicago and all around the country, Attorney Steve Levin.
Good morning. We have been involved in many cases and many similar cases, but this is a case that there are not two sides to this story. There is only one side, and that is this behavior should have never occurred. This behavior should have never been tolerated. This behavior is wrong. Northwestern University has its own policy that condemns this behavior. And I'd like to just ask you all to ask yourself one simple question. What would have stopped this ritualized sexual hazing in 1 second? And here's what it is. One position, one person in authority at this university needed to address these college athletes, these students, these people starting their college career and say, this type of behavior cannot be tolerated. If you're doing it, stop. If you don't stop, there'll be consequences. One individual in the decades-long period that this took place just needed to come forward in authority and say, cut it out. It has no place in any aspect of university life, let alone in the college football program. Just stop. That simple. It never occurred. And that's the tragedy, and that's why so many lives are involved and messed up and wrecked and conflicted because of that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Attorney Levine. Next, we will have Attorney Richard Banks, who hails from St. Louis, Missouri, but is barred in both Missouri and Illinois. He is a long-standing leader in the National Bar Association, which is the largest association of lawyers and judges of color, and I consider him a great mentor. And he is personal friends to Dr. Bill and Lloyd Yates. And I can't be any more elated to work with you on this case, knowing how much it means to your personal friends. Attorney Banks.
Thanks, Ben. The attorneys have all made excellent points, and I think that the lawsuit, the complaint, is outstanding, and it gives detail, great detail to what Lloyd went through. But I think the key point of all of it is what Ben said, what a brave young man Lloyd is to come forward. These are pretty serious allegations, and they're very embarrassing to come forth and talk about. It takes great courage. He's a great Chicago kid. His dad, Dr. William Yates, is a Northwestern grad. His mom, Dr. Lloyd Yates, both reside here in Chicago. Very heartfelt for them, but they couldn't be prouder, and I'm happy to be here with them to represent Lloyd because he has shown great courage in coming forward and being named in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Attorney Banks. And the last speaker you will hear from, and everybody here will take questions. Even his mother and father said they will take questions as well if need be, because they stand in solidarity with Lloyd in coming forward and having the courage to come forward. And we don't take this lightly, what Lloyd is doing. We understand, he understands he's opening himself up to all kind of criticisms, but he said it doesn't matter. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And I just want to say thank you, Lloyd Yates, for standing up for right. Your courage is helping launch this Me Too movement for college sports. And regardless of what any naysayers say about you, there are groundswell of people who are saying, finally, finally, finally. So, Lloyd Yates, thank you for having the courage to step up and do the right thing. Lloyd is going to speak to you all, and then we'll start trying to take some questions. Lloyd?
When I enrolled at Northwestern University in June 2015 as a freshman quarterback, I never imagined that I would be standing here today involved in a legal action. But here I am. This is not an easy place to be, but I join other former and current Northwestern players as we finally hold Northwestern accountable. I hope 3 things will come out of this lawsuit. I want justice for all the victims of this horrific hazing. I want closure for myself and hundreds of other Northwestern football players who suffered in silence. Too often, many of us have blamed ourselves for things that were beyond our control. Lastly, I want protection for future players. Northwestern failed to protect us. I hope this lawsuit ensures that Northwestern will protect future generations of student athletes. When I read the complaint, I was overcome with disappointment, frustration, and shame. No young teenager should have to bear what we did as freshman students. We were conditioned to believe that this behavior was normal, which was sickening and unacceptable. To all the young athletes out there, I urge you to stand up. Stand up for yourself, even when the odds are against you. For I've come to realize that no one else will. But I want you to know that you have my unwavering support indefinitely. I hope that by speaking out, future athletes will be free from the physical, emotional, and psychological trauma that I experienced as a collegiate athlete at Northwestern University.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. And again, we applaud you and thank you. Before we have questions and answers, Dr. Bill Yates, Lloyd's father, is going to make some comments. Dr. Yates?
Thank you for letting me make some comments. I'm Lloyd's dad. Let me say first and foremost, because like people will ask Chris Rock, well, did that slap hurt? You know, they always want to know, did it hurt? And he'd be like, of course it hurt. People have asked me recently, did you know the severity of what was going on at Northwestern? Because as a parent, that wouldn't seem right. And I have to say, honestly, I had no idea. And to this point, to read the complaint, it's actually sickening that something like this has happened. No parent in their right mind would allow their kid to be subjected to something like this. I have to say, just as a normal parental story, in the summer of 2015, we dropped Lloyd off at Camp Kenosha, or whatever they called it. Me and my wife couldn't have been prouder than a son who had excelled academically in high school and had so many trophies in his room at home. Because he was such an outstanding athlete, it was hard to get in his room to tiptoe around the trophies. We were all so proud. Northwestern's academic superiority, nobody doubts that. They're number 10 in the U.S. World Report as far as best universities for academic superiority. And despite a lot of other D1 offers, Lloyd went to Northwestern because he wanted to participate in the football program. And we all know when the coaches come by for that proverbial home visit, as they did, and they give you a pledge of allegiance that they will take care of your son or your daughter and at all costs and make you feel secure, this is why we let Lloyd go. What we wanted to do was ensure that Lloyd made the transition from a child to an adult, an independent adult. This was what we thought was going on. As we know, college years are supposed to be magical, and a lot of us, as we sit around and talk to our college buddies, we always reminisce. But yet it seems this is not the case for Lloyd. Him and his comrades, despite their best efforts, have been exploited and sexually harassed in a way that is hard for me to even describe. This culture appeared to be so commonplace, as Ben said, that it was almost invisible, like people who wrote a book about the invisible man. It was so commonplace and so proverbial that even though it was happening to coaches, it was invisible. Lloyd's hope, just as he said, is to expose the horror and the exploitations that these young men and women went through. As we all know, in science, if you have one data point that stands out, what's that called? That's called a fluke. If you have 2 data points that stand out, you get curious. 3 data points, that's a trend. 4 data points starts to become scientifically significant for validity. And I can say right now we have more than 4 data points. Wow. So it is our hope. And my family has 100 years of legacy at Northwestern, from the undergrad to the medical school. Lloyd's brother, who's a doctor now, went there undergrad. I went there undergrad and medical school. Lloyd's great-grandfather went there to be a doctor in medical school. So we had nothing but high esteem for this institution, which I can't say that we do at this point. It's our hope that through this, that Northwestern will make the changes to the athletic program and other programs which are suffering the same moral ills and moral turpitude, and this can be corrected with rapid speed and accuracy so these things do not recur. And it's also the hope, by bringing this to light, that this puts other universities on notice before they get called out to clean up their house. So I want to thank Lloyd. It makes me feel good that we have trained him to be an independent thinker, to be a leader, and not be afraid, because we all know when it's right, you have to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Yates. At this time, we'll take your questions if you have any. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, hi. John Greco with Praise Chicago. Question for Lloyd. When you say that you want protection for future players, what would that look like?
You know, something that's in the complaint that really stood out to me was there's no way to even anonymously report some of the things that went on with us, right? So, you know, first is creating a safe space where if there's something going on that you can address those issues right away. Because going up, I was asked, you know, why haven't you gone up to Fitz or any of the other coaching staff? That's just not something a timid freshman could do. That was frowned upon. So having a way to create a safe space to report some of these issues would be a good start.
Timothy, just to clarify, Northwestern created a reporting tool in 2023. Would you like to create something else on top of that?
Margaret, you want to?
Better version of that?
You want to handle that, Margaret?
Well, that was obviously put in place in response to these allegations. So had that been in place, and it was not a difficult thing to implement when Lloyd and others were in school, that certainly would have put a stop to it.
Let me say that to that question. Northwestern had policies in place already. They had a zero tolerance policy against hazing. And so it's not the policies that are the issue, it's the people, it's the culture, it's the institution that has to do right. Yes, sir.
Just if we can ask Lloyd and as well as significant that he's the first named player as opposed to a John Doe? And how difficult was your decision to come forward like that?
Yeah, and I'll go first, Lloyd. You know, with anything, being the first is extremely difficult, especially when you're going against a well-lauded institution, celebrated coaches, and players who are saying, hold on, it's going to have an effect on our program. You can only imagine what people are saying on social media about these young people who are coming forward doing the right thing. Don't we want to encourage our children to come forward and do the right thing? And the fact that Lloyd is doing it, and he's not hiding behind any anonymity. He's saying, here I am. I'm taking a stand for right, and I am going to accept all the criticisms that comes with being the first person to initiate a movement. And so I can't say anything more than Lloyd. I know it's going to be difficult. I know there are going to be things said about you that are not going to be flattering, but just know they talked about so many people when they tried to change cultures and institutions. You're on the right side of history, Lloyd. You are on the right side of history. Lloyd, how hard was it to come forward as the first?
I mean, it was definitely something to consider, right? Just all the implications that can come with it, all the criticism. But I think what really comes down to is hearing the whistleblower and really just having a reflection on my experience there and all the trauma that ensued during the time and has had a lasting effect. And just when you really look at it, right, if you look at the complaint and you think this, you know, we had no reference, we had no foundation to really understand what, you know, college athletics was other than this. It just really made me sick to the stomach. And I really felt like I had no option but to speak my truth.
Are the two coaches who you referenced that are they still on Northwestern staff currently, do you know?
So given the sensitive nature of what that act really means, we're not going to provide any identifying details now, but they may obviously be disclosed during the course of the lawsuit.
Just to clarify, for Lloyd and Margaret, did Northwestern not have any mechanisms in place to report abuse, whether it was leadership council surveys, outside the athletic department? I've been told by sources there were multiple things that were in place. I'm just clarifying on your perspective. Were there or were there not?
Let me say this before we go there. The burden is not on the victims. What would have happened at the beginning of every football season if the coaching staff addressed the team and said, if we hear of any hazing going on, you will be expelled from the football program? That doesn't take policies, that doesn't take procedures, that is a simple mechanism. Ask yourself, if that happened, would we be here today? Address the team and tell them hazing is not tolerated. If you do it, you'll be expelled from the program. They knew what the hazing policy was. Why didn't that occur?
And that didn't occur. That's what
No one has come forward and has said that. I assume it did not.
The other thing that you have to remember is that this is so normalized for these players that even if there are surveys at the end of the year or leadership council or things where these kinds of things could be brought forward, many of them didn't know they were things to bring forward. Many of them assumed this was how it was. It was normalized in the culture. It was an institutionalized thing. And so, again, to say that those tools were a way to enforce the policies really isn't appropriate. I think the other thing that I've heard through my many interviews with players is that while there was a leadership council, the leadership council wasn't really a voice for the players who needed to and wanted to speak up about certain things.
Yes, ma'am.
Lloyd, would you say that the majority of abuse did happen at the camp? And does it give you any comfort that they've since said that there will no longer be camp off property?
I'd say, you know, abuse happened year-round. It wasn't restricted to camp. Obviously, camp was where some more graphic stuff was taking place. And And the last part of the question, can you rephrase it? I'm sorry.
Does it give you any comfort that, perhaps comfort isn't the right word, but any peace knowing that Northwestern has since said camps are no longer taking place, not only on property but out of state? They'll stay on campus.
Not really. I think it was a cultural thing, and cultures can spread. I think location doesn't really matter. So I think there needs to be a lot of work moving forward.
Was there a specific position that was more involved in the Shrek squad than others? I saw there was a reference that positions would battle each other, but I'm wondering if there was like a specific position group that kind of was spearheading this during your time there.
Not necessarily. I think, and I want to reiterate kind of what I said at the initial press conference, right? We were all victims, and I want to make that clear. No matter what role, if you were being hazed or on the perpetrating side, it was just really a culture that you had to find a position within. And for some guys, that's where their identity was. But they're not at fault. They are just as much victims as us.
Was that why I think you also made the choice that no players who hazed are named in this lawsuit? Is that sort of the logic behind that?
Yes. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Lloyd, when did you graduate from Northwestern, and how many years of football did you play there?
I graduated in 2018. I played 3 years, and I graduated in 3 years.
Can I ask one more thing? I went to a journal in Oak Park.
Please.
Give any kind of hazing at OPRF when you played there? And how big a shock was it, your first experience at Northwestern when you experienced the hazing?
Yeah, thank you for coming. Oak Park is my hometown. Love Oak Park. So, no, there was no hazing to any degree, especially not to this degree, growing up in high school. I think it was a huge shock, but I think as it's addressed in the complaint as well, we start hearing about these things on visits. So it's kind of in the back of our mind as we're going through this, but you never know what to expect. These are just stories, you hear it, but then when it happens, it becomes very real, and it's just really, and I find trouble to find the right word, but it's like a brainwashing culture that was just so normalized. And it's just wild to think back and look at the complaint, to just look at what we put up with and what we had to go through, and just how it was so normal.
Yeah. The car washing and stuff is just, it's mind-boggling when you read the complaint. Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned that you had 30 more, so coming in the coming weeks. Are those all football players?
No.
From all sports?
No, from a variety of athletic programs and even mascots.
Do you see this becoming a class action?
It's too early to tell. We're still trying to look at different legal aspects with all these great lawyers. Yes, sir.
I think last time you mentioned that some of the victims and players were minors at the time. Do you see involving law enforcement at this point? Is it too late?
I think you want everything to be done appropriately. They will make the decision what to do. But yeah, they were minors. They were 17-year-olds and some 16-year-olds who experienced the hazing.
Question for Dr. Yates.
Yes.
Mr. Yates.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Can you talk about when you became aware of this at first and what your reaction was and what your advice to your son was?
I think the first time I heard of something that I didn't think was savory, when maybe he was a freshman or a sophomore, and I'm sure it's in the complaint, but they would talk about wrestling naked in the showers, and that was kind of normal. I've never played any college sports, so I didn't have any frame of reference. It seemed very unusual to me. I kind of acknowledged it and asked him, and that's what you guys do? And he said, yeah, after the game, there's a lot of naked wrestling in the shower. Of course, to me, that didn't sound normal, but again, I'm not an athlete, so I have, no frame of reference, so I kind of let it go. But as far as anything else that occurred, Lloyd being of such, sound mind and body, kind of buried all the pain with him, I had no idea. That's the only thing that I heard and I felt was suspect, but again, not being an athlete, just like being a doctor in the old days, there's certain rituals you had to do that today you couldn't do. So I figured maybe that's the rite of passage, naked wrestling in the shower.
Well, and I'll say this, Dr. Yates, when you read about car washing, it was far more than naked showering. It was very organized, what they were doing. I think we have some questions from.
Yeah, there are a few questions from reporters who are on this, following on Zoom. So this one from DePatch. Can you provide further detail on the effort by the current Northwestern coaching staff to seek support for Coach Fitzgerald after he was fired by the university?
So I think perhaps what they're referencing is some allegations in our complaint where we have gotten reports even after players have come forward that they're getting messages from those affiliated with Northwestern, some who are still on the coaching staff, that are trying to get the players together to support Coach Fitzgerald. So I'm sure that additional details will come out as the lawsuit progresses.
Another from USA Today. Why are none of the players who allegedly performed these hazing acts not named in the lawsuit or listed as defendants?
I think as Lloyd Yates just said, better than any lawyer could say, they were all victims. These are all young people who, you know, were interjected into a culture that said this is what you're supposed to do. And as Lloyd said, he sees them just as victims as he was. Yes, sir.
You give a section in the complaint about racial discrimination and some specific instances where coaches made comments to players. Why weren't any of those coaches named, or do you expect them to be named in some way?
Well, we're still doing a thorough investigation, but several players have talked about the racial dynamics of the hazing on every level. Yes, ma'am.
So this is obviously like the smartphone era when a lot of this was occurring. I'm wondering if you guys have any videos or photos.
You're getting ahead of us, but we'll see.
Sorry. Within the complaint, Lloyd, you talk about repressing memory of the traumatic events. Can you talk about that a little bit and sort of what sparked you to come forward? It says your memory was triggered by recent news. Can you talk about that?
So some of the things that are in the complaint will be obviously left for the lawsuit, and what I think Lloyd said at the initial conference was it wasn't until the whistleblowers, the investigation, and the Daily Northwestern article that he realized that what happened to him was abusive, was sexual misconduct, and that he needed to come forward.
Just a few more if you have them.
There were a couple more that from other media. So the last half of that question from USA Today was, do you have plans to identify the other players at a later time, and if so, when, and if not, why?
I think it all come out in discovery. But yeah, Laura answered that question perfectly. They all are victims. Every young student athlete was a victim to the institutional culture of hazing at Northwestern University.
Do you expect the other three players who came forward during your news conference last week to be also fined?
Yes. Any other questions? We expect it to be jaw-dropping as you find out what these young people have been telling us about the program. I mean, it's jaw-dropping.
And have you heard from, or any of your staff been contacted or heard from any players at any other schools since all this came forward?
I think so, but I have to check with Natalie and Margaret. But I don't have it with me right now.
And is there any potential litigation against other schools based on that?
Right now, we're focused on Northwestern. We want to set a precedent, and then hopefully it will stop in every school. I hope that every college, following this Me Too moment for college sports with the Lloyd Yates complaint against Northwestern, is having meetings right now. Every college coach, football, basketball, baseball, volleyball, softball, every sport, having meetings saying that we will not tolerate you being physically, mentally, and sexually hazed in any way. And if you are, speak up now, and those individuals will be expelled immediately. Okay, last.
One last question for Lloyd. Separate from this lawsuit today, there was another suit filed on behalf of a female volleyball player. I'm just curious, were you aware of hazing going on any other teams? And if so, was there just generally a culture of hazing that was known at Northwestern?
Well, based on what we've heard from several people, that's what it was. And obviously, they are Jane Doe, so he doesn't know who that individual is.
Gigi, did you have another online question?
Yes, I'm sorry,
But while you're looking at it, you want to.
Oh, I know in the complaint you listed two staff members who also were victims of hazing. I'm wondering if those people have been contacted and spoken to, or was this just coming from you, Lloyd, or some of the other players that you were speaking to?
As time goes on, all these facts will come out, but right now we're comfortable with what we've disclosed, and there's many, many issues, but it's an ongoing, thorough investigation. And you all should remember one other thing. Northwestern hired a law firm that investigated this thing for months and reviewed hundreds of documents, interviewed scores of people, and we only saw a glimpse of that report. So we are hoping that Northwestern will release that report so we can see what they have determined and the decisions they made based on what they determined.
From the interviews that you guys have done, your extensive interviewing, do you have any information that you found, that the Northwestern investigation also found, just based off of overlapping people you've interviewed or things?
We haven't seen the Northwestern report. It's remarkably consistent in that the executive summary that they released of the Northwestern report says the events happened, that they were widespread, and in their words, there were significant opportunities for those in charge to discover it.
Gigi, last question.
So what kind of protections does Lloyd think are required for student athletes in the future? Protections for their scholarships, for their playing time?
I think we've sort of answered that question. It's sort of obvious. This is not a mysterious area. Just simply say, don't do it anymore, and provide a safe place for people to come forward if it happens, period.
The only other question that was put forth was, is there any intention of combining either just resources or the lawsuits themselves with the other legal team filing suits?
All those decisions will be made as time goes on.
Okay. Thank you all so much. We will keep you updated as we move forward on future complaints.
Thank you.